Although we are sharing this year's events virtually, the festival is based in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and we respectfully acknowledge the land on which we gather as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, whose culture has been lost forever and can never be recovered. We also acknowledge the island of Uktahumguk, Newfoundland, as the unceded traditional territory of the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq, and we acknowledge Labrador as the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Innu of Ntsinan, the Inuit of Nunatsiavut, and the Inuit of Nunatuhavut. We recognize all First Peoples who are here before us, those who live with us now, and the 7 generations to come. As First Peoples have done since time immemorial, we strive to be responsible stewards of the land and to respect the cultures, ceremonies, and traditions of all who call it home. As we open our hearts and minds to the past, we commit ourselves to working in a spirit of truth and reconciliation to make a better future for all.
Hello, everyone. My name is Susan Brinton, and I'm very delighted to be the moderator of this panel on childcare in the Canadian screen industries. Our panel today is on childcare in the film and television and theater industries in Canada. As we have seen, the COVID pandemic has laid bare countless shortcomings, one of which is support for caregivers. It's never been easy to be a working parent, and yet the lack of universal support for childcare, particularly in the film industry, is a major topic for discussion. Childcare in this country only seems to be viewed as an abstract. And we've seen in the recent federal election, the political parties competing amongst themselves to commit to childcare initiatives, but not connecting them to the bigger economic and social underpinnings of what this reliance on women's underpaid and unpaid work has done to our economy and our society, and most importantly, its impact on low income and Indigenous women, Black and Asian women, other women of color, and the impact on our ability to be part of the industry is definitively hampered. So what we want to do today is talk about how we can understand this abstract concept from a personal perspective of parents and caregivers, and how it can be more proactive in making the industry a better, healthier, more equitable and open industry for all of us. So what I want to do in the first part of our panel is talk to these amazing people who are working on these issues in our industry. And I would like to start with Lauren Grant. Lauren Grant owns Click Pictures, which has produced Sugar Daddy and Riot Girls, amongst other fascinating programs, a vibrant film and television company that focuses on working with female creative talent in front and behind the camera. Lauren received international attention a few years ago at the Cannes Film Festival when it refused to let her bring in her child, her very small baby, as a matter of fact. And so I would like to start with Lauren. Lauren, tell us about, from your perspective, the importance at things like markets, conferences, and overall the film industry in allowing you to be a mother at the same time as being a worker in this industry. Tell us about Cannes and what motivated you.
Yeah, so I'm a producer, as you said, and I at the time of Cannes in 2016, my daughter was 8 months old. I had been pretty lucky to, usually having worked for myself right before having a baby, had worked on a television show, and so I actually benefited from our government's maternity leave. It was the only time I'd really been able to pay in for a solid year and like 10 years of work. But I also knew that my slate of projects couldn't just all stop. And, I mostly took a lot of time off, but by Cannes, I was sort of looking ahead to like getting projects off the ground. The projects actually were Riot Girls and Sugar Daddy, so very happy to say they did get made. And I went to Cannes, and a few friends had gone previously with babies. So I had reached out and said, what did you do? How did it work? And we had planned, my husband's also in film. He's a distributor. My child was breastfeeding. She was eating solids, but like not super consistently. And I reached out to some friends and they said, you can't go in the main building, which is where the bathroom is, but you can go here. But the Canada Pavilion is very helpful. And if you remember at the time, this was actually leading into this festival, there had been some terrorist attacks in Nice. And so there was more security that year at Cannes and military walking up and down the street. And so I went, jet lag, standing in line with a baby asleep in a sling on my body to get my pass. And I was told the baby could not come in. And that was sort of the start of it, where I was like, she's not doing anything. Like, she's literally asleep. So we'd brought, I was lucky enough, I have an older stepdaughter, and she was coming to help. So the plan was she would help, and I would go to my meetings, and I wouldn't go to parties, and I wouldn't go to dinners, and I wouldn't go to movies, but I would go to my meetings, and that was it. And so that started it. So I woke her up and took her off out of her sling and gave her to my stepdaughter, and we went in one at a time. And I was like, what's happening? And they said, well, because of the terrorist attacks, we're being stricter with security. And I was like, okay, but she's 8 months old. I don't understand. What is the problem? And I went to the Canada Pavilion, and I spoke to the lovely staff they hire in France every year. And they said, well, what do you mean? Of course you're welcome here. And I was like, well, I can't get through security. And they're like, well, that makes no sense. So this was on for a few days, and I would run into my meetings, much longer security lines that year, run out and literally breastfeed on the side of the road while the military walked by me. And I was like, it was exhausting and emotionally exhausting. And a few friends were like, this is so insane. Like, what is going on? And a friend of mine who was a publicist was like, this is ridiculous. It was the year after, very famously, some queer women had been denied access to see the film Carol because that film, they weren't wearing high heels. So it was like kind of this time of like, WTF. I'm not sure if you want me to swear or not. So the publicist, I got a phone call from the Hollywood Reporter saying, what is happening? And at the same time, someone had eventually connected me with the head of the market. And I was like, this is impossible. She's a baby. I understand the concern. So far, people have told me there's a terrorism risk. And other people have told me, well, she can't come to movies. And I'm like, I was like, being a parent doesn't make you stupid. I'm not trying to bring her to a movie where she's going to cry through some premiere you're having. I'm literally going to a meeting where she's sleeping. And I do have childcare help for all those other times. Anyway, so I spoke with the Hollywood Reporter right after getting a pass. They gave me this sort of like, for an exception, you can have a pass. And I was even open if they're like, you can't bring a stroller, you can't bring this, whatever the real terrorism concerns were. So I spoke to the Hollywood Reporter, and I was nervous because I wasn't, when you're in it, I at the time was certainly not feeling brave enough to really make a big stand at the time. I was literally just trying to have my meetings so that I could make movies in the coming years. So after that article came out, CBC, tons of other press called, and I said, I can't that's not why I'm here. But I also got a very angry email from the festival, CCing the head of Telefilm at the time, Carol Brabant, and they were pissed. How could you make us look bad? We gave you a pass, we accommodated you. And I was told, which I haven't actually fully talked publicly about, I was told by Telefilm to not respond and to have a meeting with Telefilm. So I had to change some of my meetings and miss some things to have what I felt was a sent to the principal's office meeting, where I was told, there's sensitivity around this festival's treatment of women. And, you, not that I shouldn't have talked to the press, I was never told that, but like maybe there was something else I could have done instead. Which was like, I'm not gonna lie, I like cried through the whole meeting. It was like, this is a nightmare. This whole situation is a nightmare. And I was told that it would be dealt with by Telefilm and the festival directly, and I should step back. And a few weeks after the festival, I got a really nice email from the festival saying, I hope we would have talked about this. You didn't respond to my last message. And that's when I felt, home and safe and ready to be like, this is bullshit. And I emailed and said, here's the issue. I'm a parent. If the concern is terrorism, like, Telefilm had told me that their concern about terrorism was like, if the baby died in a terrorist attack. I'm like, I feel like the concern is for everyone who dies. I don't think it's worse if I was like, I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. So he and I had a long ongoing conversation, and I said, it needs to be transparent. It needs to be a policy. Me knowing now that I can get a pass, and it's a very short time in life. I'm not suggesting I needed a pass. My kid came the next year. I didn't get a pass. I didn't need to. She ate, she walked, and so it was hard. And he and I went back and forth and had a really lovely actual dialogue about the situation. And I also said, I'm really sorry that you felt I ignored you. I was told not to reach out. And then a few years after that, I feel like this does have a happier ending, is an amazing group of French producers and sales agents came together and started a program called Le Ballon Rouge, and it was launched in 2019. And I volunteered one morning to open the childcare, and it's daycare. It's daycare in the festival. It's an amazing space. There's also like a whole brochure you get if you register. It's clear on the Ken website, which has constantly been my thing, because the next year my friend had the same issue with her baby. She was pregnant the year I had a problem. The next year she's like, I don't understand. They're saying I can't have a baby. I was like, literally you have to call the head guy, which seems like a waste of his time. Like, bless him, he's got to be busy during the Cannes market. And so I sort of reached out after the second festival saying, hey, just wanted to let you know I had my baby. I didn't reach out to you. I didn't need to pass because, as I explained, it was a very specific time of her life, but I know other people had issues. You need transparency on your website or you're going to keep having this happen. So the Ballon Rouge is launched at Cannes, at San Sebastian. Myself and Felice Frappier worked with TIFF in 2019. Obviously, we have less subsidized daycare, so it was more expensive here, but it was, I think it was something, it was like 30 euro for the week in Cannes. It was nothing. It was just nothing. It was amazing. And then there was like a list of nannies. So if you needed a movie or a film or nighttime when the Ballon Rouge wasn't open, it was incredible. And even the first year of the pandemic, they did it virtually. So my daughter actually, when she was home those early days, did like virtual Ballon Rouge with a little girl from Germany and another kid from France. And it was amazing.
No kidding.
So there's a path to do it. But yeah, so I hope as we come back, these festivals and we can spread out. It has, Berlin apparently has always had a daycare. I haven't attended since having a child. And so I think there's ways, but it took, you know, as you open this, it took a lot of free labor from a lot of mostly women fundraising to make it happen, because it felt like a big thing. And it was like fully, I should know, but it was fully paid for. Like it was fully subsidized by two big sales companies in France. And there's just, it's possible. So yeah, we did it for TIFF. And the biggest thing is the organization sort of parenting at film festivals. It has a Facebook page. Also will provide information. There's a WhatsApp group. So if you're going to a festival without childcare, people from that area have been like, oh, these are childcare services I use, or this is kid-friendly services. So it's grown and it's really helpful, but honestly, it was super traumatizing at the moment. And I since then recognize how many people have told me they're inspired by it. So I'm in hindsight okay that it happened, but you know,
Excellent.
it was brutal.
Yeah, and I think it was inspiring because it did point right to a problem. These are babies. These are not terrorists with little, you know, AK-47s stuck in their diaper bag, for heaven's sakes. And it really did make a difference at that level. So thank you for that. It's always traumatizing. Amy Nosbakken is the Toronto-based director of the theater and film company, quote unquote collective, or QUC. She is an actor and co-writer of the film Mouthpiece and currently developing a live mixed media piece entitled Universal Childcare. I love it. It is set to premiere on it's the Broad Stage. It reads as the Broad Stage, which I thought was a great theater name. It's the Broad Stage, but I guess it's pronounced Broad. Hey, Amy?
That's true.
Anyway, she is doing this fascinating senior project. It will launch in LA on the Broad Stage in 2023. She and her partner have been conducting extensive interviews on family care throughout the arts industries while working on this piece, which is described as a 9-person multilingual, multinational mashup of a cappella voices that scream for universal childcare. Welcome, Amy, and tell us about how you got involved in this topic.
I guess I'll tell you about this show we're making. As you said, it's a 9-person a cappella choir screaming for federal policy change and financing. And we are comparing and contrasting childcare policy and parental leave, zooming in on 4 of the wealthiest countries in the world: Canada, the United States, Denmark, and Japan. And the play has a enormous structure, which is like the cross section of an apartment. And in each of the boxes, you have a couple from each of the countries, as well as a childminder from Mexico who has left her family, her children, her life in order to look after of others across the sea. And so we're aiming at examining federal policy, but we are doing that by zooming in on the individual small domestic dramas of how it affects real life in real terms, like Like if you just gave birth and it was an emergency C-section and you have to go back to work in 2 weeks and you can't walk, what is that like? Or you pee on a stick and you think immediately, this is going to cost me $14,000 just to give birth to this child. Or you pee on a stick and you're in Tokyo and it's your second child, and you know that 6 weeks before they're born, my first child will automatically be taken out of their daycare because the government believes that mothers should look after two if they're going to be at home anyway, since they're going to be at home anyway, because we're desperate for the spot. Or perhaps you're an artist and you're a theater and filmmaker, and your partner, male partner who earns more than you, goes to work. So you are at home and you are used to making a theater salary, which the average is less than 1,000 a week for 8 shows a week, or in rehearsal 6 days a week. Not conducive to raising a child. And personally, I have never been asked if I need childcare. I've begged for it. I've never been asked if I need an hour to pump. I've never been offered a flexible schedule. These are all things that now in the theater community we're starting, because of the pandemic, to think about. But anyway, these individual stories in the play we're expressing largely through song and a sonic universe made up of these audio recordings of interviews from caregivers around the world. And we've started to carry out those interviews, and I gotta tell you, it's very sad. It's joyful and inspiring because parents, it's a joy to be a parent often, and children are a joy. But the stories are very different because the cultures are different and policy are different. But the reverberating story among mostly the mothers is, the bottom line is as you said, Susan, it's 2021. Men and women are not equal. Mothers who are women of color, Black and Indigenous, stand at the intersection of multiple injustices. The lack of affordable, available childcare is a central, fundamental, massive roadblock to gender equality. And nothing is changing. Very little is changing. You look back through history, even in Canada, prime minister after prime minister making promises for policy change. And then, like Paul Martin, we came close, but then there's always a shift, an election, a shift, and we go back to not caring. So unless there is a state of emergency, like a world war, where they implement emergency policy, we regress. So right now we have a state of emergency. We have the global pandemic. And so I truly believe we're making this play, and the co-writers are myself, Nora Sadova, Lisa Karen Cox, Vicky Araiko, and Seiko Nakazawa. We're making it because we truly believe that art has a place. Art can play an important role. We need so much change at every single level, and we're aiming for federal policy, but the people have the power. It's the people, the individual minds of society that need a little shift. And I've seen it happen, that a film or a play can change people's minds, inform people, ripples of aha moments, so that when it comes to an election and childcare is on the docket or not, we will make it a priority. And in Canada, we're so lucky to have universal health care. We just don't think of childcare, raising the next generation of children, and gender equality as a priority or my responsibility. And so I truly, and the makers of this play truly believe that, yes, we should be talking about policy change, but we should be talking about how we're going to change the minds of people, because this is a necessary step. Otherwise, we'll never get there. And that art, storytelling, empathy, we need to be all angrier. I believe it's our responsibility as artists to put it into the content of the work and not shut up about it until there's change.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And this is what I'm talking about. It's a group of women and men who are parents in this industry. Look at, and we have a parent looking after his child right now, which is makes me so happy, you know, because it is a parenting issue. It's not a women's issue. It's not an abstract issue. It's about raising the next generation of Canadians. And it's about whose stories get told, because who's behind or in front of the camera impacts what the stories tell, impacts the roles of society. And we have to be open to that. And we have to find ways to include parents and our future generation of politicians and citizens of what the importance is of providing good care for our children. Heather and Sean work on the production side, work on the technical side in the film and television industry. They are union members, they are parents, and they are part of Real Families for Change Canada. Heather is the executive director, and they are working within the industry with unions, etc., on this. So perhaps you guys can talk to us about the realities you face as parents and what challenges do you face?
I'll start on my end, Sean. What you guys don't see is we have a 2.5-year-old running around circles on Sean's end. So he's given me the office today, and he's taking on parental juggling.
Excellent.
But, you know, a little bit about what my personal story. When I was pregnant with my first son, I was about 7 months pregnant, well within the capabilities of continuing on with my work. And I was told by my boss that I needed to go home and raise my children and support my husband's career. We happened to be working on the same show in very parallel positions. And so I was subsequently let go. The producers on the show knew, the production manager knew that was the case. And more recently, the parent company has kind of been brought into the fold. At the time, I was really embarrassed that I thought I could keep working in the industry. I thought it made me a bad mother. And I walked away from that and started looking into ways that, you know, parents juggle this. And that's when we started Real Families for Change Canada. And the journey kind of began. But what I've noticed is that when I tell this story, a lot of people, and people that should be holding the gates of equity and holding up those walls for members, nodded along in agreement with the idea that I should go home, raise my babies, and come back, you know, 10 or 15 years from now, just support my husband's career. And, you know, I think the first thing that was really stood out about that is that the idea that a mother is responsible for stepping out of the workforce, raising the children, and a father is not, was shocking. I was raised that, you know, women can be in the workforce, and, you know, there's lots of, you know, there's research and there's recruiting that we do for women in the workforce. But once they have a child, then we don't want them anymore. And I found that incredibly discouraging. And I think what we found with the research we've just done is this is not a solitary incident. Women across the industry are seeing this. It was, you know, and there really isn't a clear picture as to who's responsible for holding those gates of equity. So we all want to talk about, we all want to have the, you know, we support equity statements, but in practice, who is making sure that that doesn't happen? And because we have such a layered industry, I think there's a lack of clarity in that. I think there's also a lack of true belief that we want parents in this industry. And, you know, that comes from both the industry and the childcare industry. I think there's a real lack of understanding of what the industry requires in the childcare field. So
We
it's
definitely
really
have an issue with the working hours in the production industry of, 14, 16, 18-hour days, 6 days a week, evenings and weekends, night shoots, etc. That is not part of the standard daycare provision hours. And so right away, our industry, because of the nature of the work, whether it's on set, on stage, in the office, is that it's not a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 job. And so, especially in this industry, I just wanted to expand more on that, because I don't think people understand how hard this industry, it's mandatory overtime. It's not like you want to be paid overtime and make a bunch of money for 3 months of the year and then childcare problems when you're not working, but it's also that it's mandatory. So the whole notion of, well, you guys are paid really well and you don't need childcare then, is like, that's not a real argument. So maybe you can expand on that.
Yeah. And I think that too is a question of alignment between the government bodies, childcare industries, and the film industry. One thing we found we do a lot of work with legislation and licensing across the country, and just explaining that, things like subsidies, so that the structure of subsidies does not align with the way we work. The structure of childcare contracts for daycare does not align with the way we work. The hours of available daycare, there are very few options for parents who don't work typical 9 to 4. And the expectation that parents shouldn't work those jobs means that we will have no female directors, or very, very few. We will have no women in theater. Both Sean and I come from a theater background. And I think the theater industry, IATSE also covers our technicians. So we've had a chance to have a lot of those discussions and talking about the structure of the way we see childcare is very important.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to bring Kate on into this. Kate on, lovely woman, is the inaugural executive director of BIPOC Film and Television, which is the Toronto-based grassroots nonprofit organization advocating for increased representation of screen media professionals from Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, both in front and behind the camera, and in leadership and key creative positions. Kate on is an experienced not-for-profit specialist involved in community engagement. She has previously worked with Women in Film and Television Toronto, as well as Ryerson University, and is the former chair of the Real World Film Festival. Kate, you and I have talked about this, and you have a lovely perspective as both being a parent and a single parent, if I may share that, raising a child, trying to work in the industry. At the same time, you are dealing with the intersectionalities of race and gender, ethnic background, opportunities, and lack thereof for a number of underrepresented groups in this industry. And what we often find is that, it's not, women are 50% of the population, yes, but not all women, under the incentives and initiatives that are being put forward for gender equity, is not helping all women. It's not raising up all women. There are other systemic biases that come into play, and that we need to recognize going forward, the intersectionality of these requirements. You are not just a mom, but you are a member of a community that has something specific to say. So I would love to give you the floor on this, both your experiences and what you hope we can do going forward on this. Where do we go from here?
Thank you so much, Suzanne. My son was around 4 years old when I decided to enter the industry, mainly working in the documentary space. But even then, it was so difficult for me to, one, find training, because I had no experience. I had I didn't go to film school or anything like that, but to even find training that fit within my schedule that will still allow me to work part-time so I could meet my basic needs, take care of my son, and to do all of that. So it was really hard for me to find it. And the only way I found it was through a community organization called Manifesto, who was doing a collaboration with Hot Docs. And those were on evenings after 6 p.m. It was around like 6 to 9 p.m. downtown Toronto I had to travel to. So that meant that I had to find childcare for my son while I went to those sessions. And thankfully, like my mom did it. At the time, she didn't understand what I was pursuing, but let me at it. So it was between my mom and other people supporting me, like friends pulling up on that, so I could actually participate in something to get the foundational knowledge to build a career in this industry. Then even when I got my first job in the industry was a 6-week internship that paid me $600 flat. So that was like the beginning of it for me, and coming in with somebody with like the little experience. I'm also carrying it as a single parent as well. And for those 6 weeks, I was just like, okay, I could pay for my bus pass. I can buy some groceries with that, and that turned into a full-time job. I was at a production company for 2 years. But I even remember one thing that I did back then was I honestly, like most times, hid that I was a parent, because I saw people's reaction to that. Automatically is the assumptions, okay, she's a parent, she won't be here always, she may have to leave to go take care of her child may be sick, she won't be here. And I found that was so bizarre, because even if I was personally sick, I wouldn't be able to come to work, so how is it different just because I have a parent? You think all of a sudden, whoa, I'll have additional sick days, and I'll be gone for like a month or something like that. But face that. So I sometimes hide it, and employers will find out afterwards that I do have a child. But it was still balancing all of that. How that affected my job search was that I was drawn more to places where they had children around my son's age, where they had younger children, or they've been parents, they've been in similar situations as me. And those are the spaces that I would feel safest in. But still, the people who I worked for carried certain privileges that I didn't have access to. Most of them had nannies, had additional, could pay for babysitters, could do all of these additional things that I could not. So that limited me as well. And I think when we consider these issues around gender equity, we're doing it a disservice if we don't apply an intersectional lens with that and think about people who carry these multiple identities and additional constraints against them based on a lot of the biases and a lot of the systemic oppressions that exist within our society. We have to look at it through the lens of race and gender, class, access. We have to think about all of these things as well, because I worked at Women in Film and Television for the Toronto chapter for about 3.5 years, but I noticed a lot of our programming took place at 8 o'clock in the morning or in the evening. And as much as we were a women's focused organization, that alone, was a barrier to so many women fully participating in the organization. And if we expand that in the industry, and when we're talking about this in terms of women with family care responsibilities in our sector, we have to think not just about the workplace, but what are the other opportunities that women are missing out on because our programming is not accessible, our events are not either, because we know that what happens in networking spaces, that's where deals are made. That's where informal job interviews take place.
Yes.
This is where people get access to people who could take their career to the next level. Even women accessing training opportunities as well in our sector. We have to think about the timing of them too, and really commit to women's full participation in our sector. And now we even have to think about women with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
is the space accessible for women as well? So I think when we talk about gender equity, which is, I don't like talking about gender equality, because I think that people are coming in from different spaces of privilege and access. And there are some people who need more of a boost than others because of the systemic oppressions that they've faced, the things that they're up against as well. And I know that this conversation is around childcare, you know, but thinking about, we really need to apply that to our sector, to thinking about, are we providing, when we have those breakfast events, are we providing childcare around that? You know, or are we thinking about pushing the time so women could do that drop off, and then come to it to fully participate as well? When we think about things that are only set up in the evening time, you know, who is excluded from it? And we have to think about it as, who are the most excluded in our work, and build around them, build new processes around these people. And then oh my gosh, I know you also wanted me to talk about the denial that comes with that too, you know. I had someone tell me this week that the issues that I'm talking about, everybody in the industry feels them, that it has nothing to do with race or gender. And had to take a breath with that, you know, but there are people who actually believe that. And these are the microaggressions that we face daily, you know. These denials, day by day, they erode our sense of self. They are silencing, they are a form of gaslighting as well. And we have to always counter that. And I keep seeing that, I keep seeing that time and time again in the different studies that are done in our sector, where we group all women together and think, okay, that's a singular experience, and it is not.
Yeah.
I've had a producer tell me once that me and her are the same as single parents. And I'm like, but we are not, because you have a nanny, you have a maid, you have you have access to capital, all of these additional things that I do not have. So while we both may be women, we are both single parents, our experiences are not the same, you know?
Thank you.
And I think that I think there's a fear of acknowledging the differences amongst us. And our differences could be so beautiful that it could be a way for us, it is a truth, you know, that we could see, like, I think it could just strengthen us, you know, in honoring that my walk may not be your walk, you know, and there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, there is beauty in our differences. I think the denial of it, that's what's violent. That's what's erasure, you know? So those are some of the issues and some of the things that I've seen, you know, and what we really need to talk about in our sector. And my main thing for this is, who is being left out? And let's start
not
there.
at the table? Who's not at the table? Yep. That's
And
one
why
of the
are they there?
Yes. Thank you, Kate. That's lovely. Because it is, our differences make us stronger. Why not celebrate them? You know, I fear for this fear. I fear for the fear of this. And Sean has his own personal perspective as well, because as somebody working in the industry, you have your own intersectionalities of gender, you know, race, in this, you know, level of income, all those sorts of things. And you have a perspective that I would love for you to share from your experience.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's something that has been very prevalent hearing everyone's stories here, that women are often forced to leave the industry. And what happens with men is they're often forced to leave their families. So I've met a lot of Teamsters who they're in this situation where they work 16, 18, 20, 2-hour days sometimes. And I've met some of them that say they don't know their adult children. They have not been able to be integrated into their child's life because of the scheduling, because of the work that is expected of them. And, with Heather and I's work with what we're doing with trying to create kind of an integrated childcare system for the industry, it's something where people can experience their families alongside the work that they're passionate about. And that's really what I want to pursue. And in the same way that men have to leave their families, Indigenous people often have to leave their culture to work in this industry. And the way that works out, I've worked in Indigenous theater and film for a long time. I worked for the Talking Stick Festival in Vancouver. I've worked with the Capilano Indigenous filmmaking program, a lot of the students there, and we've done some very culturally specific work. And the problem I get when I talk to a lot of Indigenous filmmakers is they feel regaled to only working on Indigenous work. They do not feel welcome in work that is not Indigenous work. And it's because they have a different cultural expectation of them on how they just proceed with their daily lives. If a family member dies, it's very important for everyone to be at that funeral. And I'm sure many of you have had to skip funerals or had to skip, important life events for your loved ones. And it's not really culturally acceptable to do so in a lot of Indigenous communities. And so they don't feel that they have that space to work in a type of working system that doesn't allow for that kind of freedom, or that kind of understanding. And so I've tried to help mentor some Indigenous people into the industry, and it's worked for some, but it hasn't worked for others because it's not a welcoming industry at all times. And as Katon put there, there's the microaggressions more than anything else. What do you mean you can't do this? What do you mean, you can't do that? And I know for a lot of the people that I've tried to help get in the industry, they feel that. They don't feel that welcoming space. And so where it comes to becoming a parent again, the culture of what family is also very important. And so when we talk about solutions to this problem, I think it's paramount that we make film a family business. And we make a film a family business that works with everyone's culture as well. And it doesn't have to be the way it is. We can still make the movies. We know how to do this. We know how to make stage plays. We can do this. But without ensuring that families are first, we don't become our fully actualized selves. And as a creative field, if we aren't fully actualizing who we are as people, we aren't also giving our best selves to what we're making. So it's a disservice not only to our personal individual lives, it's a disservice to the product that we're creating. And I think if we don't create some kind of integrated family workplace within our industries, we are going to lose out. We're going to lose out on some amazing work that can happen from everyone. So, hi, Maverick.
And I love it. And I mean, again, I hope I'm not cutting you off, Sean, but because only got so much time left, and we need to now look at with Canada, the Women Film and Television Canada Coalition is releasing a report right now entitled "Who is Responsible? The Family Care Project." And both Sean and Heather have been involved in this project and contributors to the final report. And we are so happy to be able to release it. We got emergency pandemic funding through the CMF to look specifically at child and family care in our industry, because it's not, even though childcare is the biggest component of family care, it's not all of it. There's elder care, there's looking after disabled adult children or children. There's so much involved to caregiving. And we need to recognize the priority of, don't we value caring for others in our country? And then in our industry, the work-life balance is insane. The licensing requirements for daycare do not cover our gig working economy. Not only in this industry, but any industry that works based on a contract system like we have. It does not protect the workers. It's all these pandemic related, the systemic issues that come up. We have to institute change. And why the report is called "Who is Responsible" is because Heather and I had this conversation, and it goes, well, there's the unions, but they're kind of hamstrung because they want to get the work. So they want to make the concessions. but that's not in the best interest of their workers while trying to get them jobs and giving away meal breaks, you know, and allowing for 16-hour days. There's the employers, the studios, the production companies who are driven by economics. And so their need to come to you is going to be based on the best deal that you as a BC entity or a Toronto entity or an Atlantic entity, how much money can you bring to the table? And so their basis is purely economic. They are not looking at funding childcare as a line item or any kind of additional cost. They are driven by money. The government is driven by labor and wanting to build an economic infrastructure of labor. And there you have the federal and provincial labor tax credits, which go to support the hiring of Canadian workers with government taxpayer money in our industry. And yet there are no hiring requirements. There is no need to attach balanced representational hiring and crewing when you get this free money. And so these are all big areas that we need to target. And that's what the family care report is going to, is that this is a government subsidized industry. Whether you are an independent filmmaker or theater, state, you are relying on government funding. That is taxpayer money. The government therefore owes everybody a quid pro quo in this country. It needs to be tied and led by the government. It needs to become an item in production budgets and theater budgets, that childcare is an accepted and required component to be expanded to family care. I always am conscious of not forgetting about that. And we need to look to the government to be responsible for this money. And that is ultimately the recommendation of our report. Because what we need to get to is we need reasonable accommodation in the industry for parents and caregivers. We need a societal recognition that unpaid labor by women is not acceptable to the tune of $10 trillion a year around the world. Get over it. Personally, sorry, my little rant. But now I want to open it to each of you in terms of a sort of a short commentary on what do you see as how we can do this from your perspective, as where do we go from here? Quickly, specific recommendations. Lauren, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think a few people have talked about the work hours, but I think when we talk about work hours in this business, we still fundamentally think 12 hours plus 1 hour of lunch is an acceptable day. And so if you're not checking out IA stories out of the US, I think it's vitally important. There are many European countries where 10 hours is the max. The gaffer turns off the generator, you're done. I think the fact that if you're fighting for 12-hour days, we are going to continue to exclude so many people from this industry. And also, I don't think we do great work at that time. And I know in my career, I would have made more work if those hours, basically when I make a movie and I produce a movie, I do not parent for that time. And I have a partner, so he can. But I think also there's recognition that children are people. Like, she's a person who misses me, and I don't understand why it's acceptable to like piece out of her life for like 7 weeks on a low budget. So I continually say no to things because of the hours. And that's what I'm trying to figure out is like, how do I convince people to give me more money, to shoot more days, to shoot shorter days, because that's what I want to do. And I think it has to start at work hours, but I'm trying to set up meetings with our unions. Like 12 hours cannot be the acceptable number. I know there's, of course, these horrible stories of 22-hour days. I've worked them in my life. I don't even want to talk about those. I want it to be 10. And 10 is still a long day.
It's doable.
It's doable, but I think it should be the max. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally. Kaydon, I want to come back to you because you want to have something to add as well.
Yes. So my contribution to this is for it to also be tied to some funding for training and programming as well. So for example, for our upcoming showrunner boot camp, a portion of the budget is put aside for participants who have to cover childcare and family care while they're participating in the programs. These are full day programs on Saturdays, or 4 Saturdays between October and November. And the only reason why we're able to do this is because our funding is independent. There is no line item in terms of grants and programs for us to include that. I would like to see that going forward so we can ensure that parents and caregivers have a chance to participate in programs. And this could come, for me, it's like if people want to do it where, okay, I could order dinner for the family or order lunch for the family. So I don't have to do that during the day. That's taken care of. That's what they could do with that money. So that is something that I would love to see. And my big thing will be additional funding to support that on top of even the program budget as well. So you can really support people through that process. One thing, and then just quickly, I just wanted to add in to what Sean was talking about us honoring different family dynamics as well. I think anytime I hear in terms of Indigenous models, it's very similar to what we have in the Caribbean and in some African societies as well, where families extended beyond the quote unquote nuclear family. That's why also in terms of BIPOC TV and film staff policy, family leave is extended for caregiving, caregiving as well. And that could be for blood family. It could also be if you're helping a friend through a crisis as well, that we count that as part of it. And it's to take that time. So we have to talk about how are we reshaping workplace policies so people could fully participate as well. So that would be like my contribution to that conversation.
Excellent. I mean, it is about flexibility and accommodation, and it's not that unreasonable, but it is looking at, you know, and we try and talk about this in the report. I should probably state, I am the author of the report. It was commissioned by WIF Canada Coalition. So I do get engaged in this topic. It really is not only about providing childcare, but quality childcare. Number one, let's pay people what they're worth to look after our children and not leave it to, you know, people who are probably looking after their own children being paid $15 an hour to look after other people's children. You know, that's just, it's so needs to be done, and it's so important. And it also has to be culturally specific. You know, I mean, we have so many rich, vibrant cultures, but every parent that I've talked to wants their child to be raised and go to it, be part of a community of which they are part. They do not want to travel 20 kilometers to drop their child off in an unfamiliar space with unfamiliar people, because that happens to be the closest one to the location or the only space they can find. I mean, finding space, as we know, is already impossible. Let's spend the money to build the infrastructure to deliver the child care that every Canadian citizen should have a right and entitlement to expect. Amy, how about you? What do you think?
There's so many things I want to change.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, like a line item, budget line in every company's operating funding that goes towards childcare. As an individual artist, I can't tell you what it feels like to be told there's money just for childcare, because as a self-producer, I can get grant money, but personally, I just feel so guilty spending that money on childcare. I think it could go to props, it could go to costume, it could go to sound design, it could go to all these things that are a higher priority than childcare. And I'm making a play about childcare, and I have not started to pay for it. I just like you were saying, Karen, about piecing together. I believe it was you who were saying piecing together a parent and a friend as an hour here and an hour there, and maybe a nap, maybe not. And as well, I'd love to see implemented is childcare for audiences, which we've started to do, but having child-friendly, family-friendly, family care for audiences, so that we can go and see shows and grow as a community that way as well.
I mean, I may be showing my age, but I remember when my mom made me go to church, there were crying rooms in church. And there were crying rooms at movie theaters, right? You could take your kids and be a mom with your 5 kids and sit in the crying room and get to watch a movie. Anyway, I am going to give last word to Heather and Sean. We only have a few minutes left, and we could talk about this forever. We seriously could. This should be a whole conference on child and family care. So Heather and Sean, last thoughts.
Maybe I'll quickly start the toddlers out in his room. Primarily, I think there's still a social question about what is right for workers and what is right for children. So we need to reconcile if 12-hour days are required for work, 12-hour plus days, and we still say 12-hour days are not okay for children, then they're not really okay for parents either. And we need to align that belief system across industries. So that means that, these are tax credits that are heavily invested into an industry that we're saying is not okay for families. So we need to align that, and we need to make sure that tax credits align with what is good for Canadians and what is good for the next generation. The second thing is, certainly, I know a lot of people have said this, and I 100% agree that we need to realize that as an industry, if we are requiring our workers to do something that is outside standard practice, we need to accommodate for that. So that means putting childcare in a budget that accommodates for those extra 4 or 5 hours that minimum that we're requiring our workers to get childcare. I realize that, a 12-hour day might seem like the best option for production and for getting things done. Contract work may be the best thing for production. But I mean, that's just not what's best for families. So if it's causing complications, we eat lunch on set because that is the best thing ultimately to, get things done. And the best thing to do is to have childcare integrated into the workplace, whether that means, a financial contribution or, what we would call a tuition fee for childcare, or if that means integrated childcare places on set, which is really, I believe heavily in integrated childcare.
I'll take over from there if you want. And so it kind of relates to beyond the film industry and arts industries, 1 in 4 Canadians work outside of the normal 9 to 5, and there are no childcare options for people in those industries, and that's it's a quarter of all people in this country. And it's something to really take into consideration as we have these once in a generation funding announcements from the federal government, but none of it involves building the infrastructure for people who work in those industries. And that is not a small amount of people. And so we need to make sure the government understands what they're doing. And I think the big thing is people are just making it do, patchworking it with family, patchworking it with this and that. But the thing is, I don't have living family. I have my wife. We have each other. And some people don't even have that. So the fact that, we are making it work what we can, other people are making it the way they can, we need to build these structures. Because when we have them, not only does it make, our lives better, but it also makes the quality of our work stronger. And you're looking at the economic side from production. If we make everyone's lives better, the quality of work is going to go up. And honestly, that has always been good economics. And the fact that no one is looking at it that way is absurd. So we need to start giving them hard data. There's been some line producers in the States that have shown 10-hour days on French hours have been proven to not only provide a better product overall. I worked on a show recently that was 10-hour camera days. That was it. We still had a bit of wrap and prep, but it was different. And I will tell you, the quality of that product, fantastic. It's going to be on HBO. I'll tell you all about it. But it's something where I think when you really invest in people and you invest in that, it pays dividends. And I think that needs to be focused on.
And if I can just quickly tag on to some things that Sean said, when we talk about linking, that 25% of people, we need to expect that the infrastructure being put in place reflects the work being done. So putting in, 1,000 childcare spaces doesn't matter if you need 750 atypically scheduled spaces. And that requires changing legislation, and that requires holding companies responsible. So when we have a studio come into a city, or in the case of, say, Burnaby in BC, there are numerous studios being put in place, and they have absolutely no requirement to assure that childcare is, the supporting infrastructure is there. And when you build a house, you are expected to put in 5 trees and 2 shrubs, and they need to be a certain type of shrubs and trees. And that's, something that cities require. But yet we allow studios that employ thousands of people and have the money to do it, to put, business in place, heavily subsidized business, and have no requirement to support the workers. And that's unacceptable. And secondly, when we, apologies for that. But I think that's incredibly important, is this is subsidized work, and we need to require the infrastructure.
Yeah. And if we don't put the pressure on the government to lead this, it won't happen, because the industry won't. The industry and the unions have no reason to change. Oh my gosh, thank you for just stimulating, fantastic, engaging, wonderful discussion about child and family care. I hope it continues. As I mentioned, the WIFT Family Care Report is out, and we are going to be talking with employers and unions and associations in the hope to move the discussion forward. If you want a copy of the report, it's at the wiftcanadacoalition.ca. It's entitled "Who is Responsible?" And it's everybody. We are all in this together. Let's solve it together, work together, and include everybody in the process. It's so exciting when you go forward together, and way more effective than fighting all the. If I could make one comment, it would be, I'm really, as an older woman, tired of this battle. I'm tired of spending the time to educate people on my rights to my own opportunities, like everybody else. And I have multiple cross-sectional identities. But the bottom line is, we all want to be involved in creative industries and tell our stories, and we need to be allowed to do so. And it's the government and industry's responsibility to work together on this. And that is our call to action. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk with all of you. And thanks to the St. John's International Women's Film Festival for giving us this opportunity.